Next up, the U.S. House held a moment of silence today for civil rights pioneer John Lewis, who died Friday at 80 years old after a battle with pancreatic cancer. Lewis was the last living speaker and organizer of the pivotal 1963 March on Washington, where he told some 250,000 protesters, quote, "We want our freedom and we want it now," before his friend and mentor, Martin Luther King Jr., gave a speech about his dream. Lewis was one of the 13 original Freedom Riders for which he was beaten by angry mobs. And in 1965, a state trooper in Selma, Alabama, fractured his skull when he tried to lead 600 people across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in a march for voting rights. The day would become known as Bloody Sunday and help galvanize support for the landmark Voting Rights Act, which President Johnson signed into law later that year, with Lewis looking on. In 1986, Lewis took his fight to the House of Representatives, where he'd go on to serve for more than 30 years and become known as the conscience of the Congress. And through it all, Lewis kept getting into what he called good trouble. I love that phrase. Racking up at least 45 arrests, from a lunch counter protest in the early 60s to an immigration reform protest in 2013, the same year the Supreme Court repealed the heart of that Voting Rights Act. 5 years ago today, Congressman Lewis was in town to talk about that issue, and I got the chance to sit down with him at the Kennedy Institute for the study of the U.S. Senate. You know, I've followed your career for a long time, and I've always found you a person of great hope. But 48 years after the Voting Rights Act, when you see the Supreme Court gut a key provision of the Voting Rights Act, essentially saying that in those states that have a history of racial discrimination in elections, they'll get rid of that pre-approval thing if they want to change the laws. At moments like that, don't you begin to lose hope, Congressman?
When the Supreme Court gutted the heart of the Civil Rights Bill of 1965, I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry. But I still believe, I'm still hopeful that we will fix what the Supreme Court did.
But it's against the context. You the other day were arguing for the elimination of the Confederate flag on federal grounds. I didn't even know it was on federal grounds. Congress tabled it. We have a disproportionate share of young black men in prisons. We have critics of the president saying we should take our country back. You didn't hear that kind of language with a white president. Do you not say to yourself, one step forward and two steps back?
In spite of all of the difficulties, in spite of all of the individuals saying we want our country back, saying that we've done enough, how much more, we must still press forward. We will get there. We will get there one day.
You were on that bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, 50 years ago. I read you said you thought you were going to die on the day that really changed history. You had a legendary backpack, and I read that you had 2 books in it and an apple, correct?
Had 2 books, an apple, toothpaste, and toothbrush.
Because you thought you were going to be in prison and needed something to read and take care of your dental hygiene or whatever.
I thought we would be arrested and jailed. I wanted to have 2 books, something to read. I had an apple, something to eat. 1 apple wouldn't last that long. But somehow, in some way, I felt in my guts that we would prevail.
What were those books?
One was the political tradition by a professor of political science at Harvard. And the other was the teaching of a monk.
If I had met you that day, and I had said to you, 50 years from now, a black president of the United States is going to stand and speak on this very same bridge, you, the head of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, big-time young organizer, what would you have said to me?
50 years ago, I probably would have said, do you know what you're talking about? Are you crazy? If someone had told me then that we had made as much progress as we've made in 50 years, I would have said, I don't think so.
How much do you think about the man? He'd be 86, I think, today. How much do you think about Reverend King in the intervening years? And do you ever say to yourself, if he were only here for this or for that issue, do you think about him and what it'd be like today?
I often think about Martin Luther King Jr. I think about Robert Kennedy. I think about President Kennedy. And I think about Ted Kennedy. These young men have changed America forever. I don't know what our country would be like today without the contribution they made.
What if they were here today?
If they were here today, I think we would be much further along down the road. I remember meeting with President Kennedy for the first time and being in his presence the day of the March on Washington, when the march was all over. President Kennedy was beaming like a proud father. He said to each one of us, "You did a good job, you did a good job." And when he got to Dr. King, he said, "You did a good job and you had a dream."
So we know all the times you marched when you were young with men and women who shared your goals. But I learned you marched with a different generation at a place that I was surprised to see you. You put together this book with some of your friends called March. It's a graphic novel about you and the struggles and those sort of things. You put on the same trench coat, the same backpack, and marched with kids at Comic-Con. Do I have that right?
Well, I put on a backpack and a trench coat.
Same thing you wore the day on that bridge.
Well, I was playing my own stuff. Comic-Con it's comic, but it's beautiful. You see hundreds and thousands of people. You see a sense of community. And to be able to walk through the hallway, down a convention floor with all of these young, beautiful children and telling them about the movement, about the philosophy of nonviolence, saying to them that you must love everybody and never hate. It was a good feeling.
Do they get it? Do young kids get it when they maybe see you in a book or read about you in a history book and they understand? Most of them know who Reverend King was, I assume. But do they buy your message, or do they say that's a message of a different time?
No, the young people get it. They get it. I've seen young people in the second, third grade saying to me things like, it tend to blow my mind. They said, "Why are you so awesome?" I don't have an answer. I just said I just try to do what is right, what is fair. I try to be kind to everybody.
Well, speaking of awesome, before you go, everybody in America has seen this video of you in your office dancing for at least 2 minutes. Look at the look on your face. To Pharrell Williams, Happy. Is that how you reduce stress, relieve stress? What are you doing?
Well, I love the song. I love the song. And for the most part, I'm a happy guy. Happy. And I tell people in my own family, cousins and second and third and fourth cousin, I tell my own staff, I tell members of Congress, be happy, enjoy life.
Congressman, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much.
Good to meet you, sir. Thank you.
A beautiful sentiment from a beautiful man. In his honor, Democrats are calling on the Senate to rename a bill to restore the provisions of the Voting Rights Act that were overturned in 2013, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020, and to pass it immediately. A petition to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge after Lewis is also getting renewed support, which is currently named after Confederate officer and Ku Klux Klan leader.